Hello everyone, welcome to Million Lights. For those who are watching me for the first time, my name is Shalini and I am a soft skill trainer as well as a spoken English trainer. Today we'll be covering up the module for the soft skill is how to make effective presentation. If you have watched me before, in our last session, we had covered how to improve your presentation. So we learned few skills and techniques to improve our presentation as well as the process to create presentation. Today we'll be covering few more topics about how to make an effective presentation. So let's start with one of it. How to organize presentation material. You know, giving a good presentation, clarity of idea, and great organization of the material can really help you to give lively, liable, compelling presentation in a very professional way. What would blue sky thinking include? The blue sky thinking would include the objective of the presentation. What is your purpose of your presentation? What is your outcome when you present to the audience? And what does audience expect from you? So that is the main objective. After the objective of the presentation comes the subject. What is the subject? Means what you are going to talk about during your presentation. Basically, it means the key elements that you want to say. It definitely comes from the objective, but doesn't have to be necessarily the same as objective. Another thing that we have to keep in our mind for blue sky thinking is the audience, the prospect of audience. What kind of audience will be coming for the presentation? National, international, college kids, children around, proprietor, entrepreneurs. So we definitely have to keep that wide range in our mind. Regarding the audience, then comes the place where the presentation is going to take place. We talked about it in our last session in detail, and I hope it's clear to you. If not, you can, I think, go back and have a look, You'll definitely find more tips on the place of the presentation where you would be giving. Along with the place, have in mind the time. The time is not that flexible because either it has to be morning or it has to be afternoon or evening times. That probably suits everyone else. So there's not much flexibility with the time. But another important thing, never forget the length of the talk. Make it sure you always have in your mind the length of the talk for the presentation that you will be giving. Here, so the next step to organize material for presentation is to select the main points. This includes three things that you have to remember. First is the beginning, the middle, and the end. What is beginning? Beginning is where you mention the purpose of your presentation, right? Your key elements of your presentation, the order that you're going to present your presentation with. So that comes the beginning. The middle. What is the middle of the presentation? Is basically you're expanding your key elements that you mentioned before. How do you expand your key elements? Your key elements are supported by, discussing, by arguments, by analysis, by appealing. So you have to expand your key elements in the main idea by using these factors. And now the third, which is the end. We all are clear. What does end mean? End means the conclusion. So in conclusion, make it sure you summarize all of your presentation, which includes the main idea too. Probably in some different wordings, but conclusion means the summarization of the whole presentation. The third important thing that we have to keep in our mind to organize material for a presentation is to decide to illustrate. Basically what happens is telling the real life stories really helps you to give a very lively presentation. So make it sure telling real life stories is what you share with your audience. Secondly is the visual aids. What does visual aids do? Visual aids help to support your main elements as we mentioned it before. It tries to give a clear picture. It tries to give a simple picture of what you're talking about. That's when we use visual aids, not to complicate things. Make in mind, remember it always, when the presentation is informal and short, there's not really necessarily to use the visual aids. But yes, when there's a big number of audience and it's a very formal presentation, you definitely use visual aids. PowerPoint. PowerPoint is nowadays a lot of people are using to support their presentation, and it's very impressive. But what happens? A lot of people forget that we are supporting our presentation, and they try to show more technology with their PowerPoint presentation. So definitely use it, but never forget the fact that we are not showing here the technology tech that we are nowadays about, but we make it sure we make things more simple, clear, and easy for the audience to understand. So the fourth thing that we have to keep in our mind, while organizing presentation material is introduction and conclusion. Introduction and conclusion are both equally important for your presentation. So in introduction, what do we have to keep in our mind? That we do mention the preview, that is what we are going to present, the purpose of our presentation, as we talked in detail in our last session, and then definitely more about the order and the organized way we are going to present our presentation. Make it sure you do drive attention of your audience. That is very important to have it in your mind. Drive audience attention. You can tell that by telling real stories. We did discuss about that in our previous session also. The second thing is the conclusion, right? We cannot leave conclusion. Conclusion is the summarization of your main presentation, but make it sure you end it decisively. It is very important for your audience to know that this is where it ends. People usually get confused where it comes for the question session, where you give the freedom to the audience to ask the questions about the presentation. We're going to cover about that session soon. Hey, so as you all know, we are doing the module of effective presentation, how to make an effective presentation. And so far we have covered the techniques and skills how to make an effective presentation, process of preparing and creating the presentation, and how to organize material for presentation. The few other things that we definitely have to keep in mind, and the next thing that we have to keep in mind is while writing our presentation. A lot of us write our presentation or we put it on a laptop. So there are a few things that you should always keep in mind. First of all is the language. Make it sure your language is appropriate, which is very important. It is familiar. What do you mean by familiar? Familiar means once you know what your audience is, you should know their background, their knowledge. So try to use the words which are familiar to them. Definitely make it sure all the presentation should also have friendly words, because that makes it very simple and it gives a very good contact between the audience and the presenter. So language is very important while you're writing or preparing your presentation. Second thing that we have to keep in our mind is to avoid long sentences. Yes, I know we are talking, and when we are talking, we get so much indulged in presenting that we forget. We keep talking and talking because we like it, right? Who doesn't want anyone to be listened? But make it sure you avoid long sentences. The reason I'm saying that is when the audience is listening to you, they lose the track of what you're talking about. You're probably more indulged in it and excited to tell them a lot of things. But think from the audience point of view. They get lost, and once they get lost, it's very hard for you to get them to the main topic of the presentation. So try to use short sentences so that they are still aiming at what you are trying to, information to them. The third thing you have to keep in mind is use of metaphors. It helps you to aid retention of what you're talking about. What does metaphor mean? Metaphor means, the resemblance of words that you can use again to explain your audience of what you're talking about. In this way, they can always relate to something else that they probably must have, experienced in their life, and it helps them to relate to what you're talking about. So now, the next thing after you have done with your, writing of your presentation is use of visual aids. Every presentation nowadays that any person makes, big or small, regardless of how important it is, we use visual aids. What kind of different visual aids can we use? Let's discuss about it. Whiteboard, right? I'm sure you all are familiar with the whiteboard. Whiteboard is used to explain things, to jot down your important points that you can, to feedback from the audience, if you're discussing something, to put any diagram on there, to make some sensitive issue more important, things that you as well as your audience remember. That's when you use the whiteboard. So apart from the whiteboard visual aids, there are a lot of other visual aids that we use nowadays in our presentations. One of them is the flip chart. It is very popular, low cost and low tech. So people, those who are not that tech friendly, which we are, a lot of them, probably try to use that. So flip chart is what? Either you can prepare before your presentation and have your notes written on it. You just have to flip a chart and come to your next note. Or you can use it during your presentation. Have it in mind, flip chart are usually used when the presentation is small and you do not have big audience. Just in case you have a big audience, it is very hard for everyone to read from the flip chart, though it is big in size but not as big as a whiteboard. Other visual aid besides that would be hangouts. What are hangouts? So hangouts are the things that you provide to the audience probably in the beginning of the presentation. It should include the summary of the presentation or the main points of your presentation. Make it sure along with that it does have a space for your audience to write down the notes so that they can remember or even add to the questions if they want to ask towards the end of the presentation. Another important visual aids that people are using nowadays, in fact everyone is using, we know, right? Even kids in the school are using, which is the PowerPoint. So you can feel the importance of nowadays of PowerPoint as every third person is trying to use the PowerPoint. Though it is common, but always have in mind it does not distract your presentation. Because we can put a lot in PowerPoint endlessly and it just distracts you. So we have to make it sure we aim at our main topic, which is what is the purpose of our presentation, and do not distract the audience at all. The other common visual aids that people use is slides. It's very commonly used too, but make it sure that you always prepare your slides beforehand in order. Make it sure you number them correctly. Commonly people face a problem is that they are not placed in order and they are not numbered properly, which can lead to give you a very poor presentation. Numbering is very important just in case you have to go back or just in case audience come back with a question where you have to answer them. You may have to go back to the slide. So make it sure you number them correctly. Other visual aids that are commonly used are the overhead projectors and videos. We can use all these as a visual aids while presenting, but do have it in your mind, have the purpose in your mind always, and do not distract the audience, as it's going to be very difficult for you to get back the audience connected with you. You know Steve Jobs. Of course you do know Steve Jobs, right? He is a great storyteller, exceptional presenter, competitive communicator, and he's the one who used least tech words. According to him, presentation is beyond the words. Presentation is something that connects emotionally and mentally with your audience. So today, now that we have learned enough about presentation skills, and I'm sure we all are following and trying to improve ourselves, it's time to learn something skills from Steve Jobs. So let's try to do that. Steve Jobs presentation is used all over the world for giving great presentation skills. Let's see what they are. First thing that he always kept in mind, and which is very important, is concise heading and theme. If you remember, he always kept his theme very short, something which is easy to remember, something which is very comprehensive. For example, in his launch of 2007 iPhone, he said, "Your life in the pocket." What does that mean? He would have showed, number of slides to show what iPhone 2007 has. But he concised his statement to life in your pocket. Why? Because it had all the social requirements which one person needs to fulfill. The second point that Steve always had in his mind is to use stories. He always used life stories so that audience can relate itself. In a very good example for an iPad when he was launching, he tried to say that I was sitting in a cafeteria with my iPad, and this girl started looking at me. So remember what happened? The whole audience started laughing loudly, because somewhere or the other we all experienced that, right? So here you see how he got connected with his audience in such an easy, small story which was related to everyone. The third tip that he usually uses in his presentation is the fewer words. This is one of the things that we all probably have to learn. Who doesn't like to talk, or who doesn't like to speak, right? We can talk endlessly, and we would love to talk when we are on the stage. Though Steve Jobs always had that in mind, and he used very fewer words. Few words like 1,000 songs in my pocket, the world's thinnest notebook, right? Touch the music. These were the small terms that he used, which explained so many things that he launched in today's world. Steve Jobs always tried to give a memorable statistics. You know, he would have everyone can use the big numbers like 25 million, 35 million, and it can go on and on. So instead of using numbers like, okay, 25 million songs downloaded on an iPhone or an iTunes, he would say 15,000 songs downloaded every minute. So what do you think? 15,000 is such an easy number to enroll in your mind, and that to download it every minute, right? Something if I'm telling you, and if you're probably listening to me, I'm sure you will remember it rather than giving a more complicated statistics. Always have in mind, give a simple statistics that a person would remember. He always paid attention on the fewer text, if you remember. Not too many slides to show. He just used to give few slides which would probably have a remarkable moment on your mind, and you would remember it. Another important thing is he always smiled. You know, while even talking to you, I'm nervous sometimes, right? And you see the smile on my face disappears. So it can happen to anyone. But Steve Jobs always had in his mind to have a big smile on his face, because it really helps the audience to be always connected with the presenter. Last but not the least that we can learn from Steve Jobs' presentation is to put the show. To put the show on. If you remember, and if you have watched his presentation, what he tried to do was to get an envelope from one of his colleagues, and he tried to put what he was launching in an envelope. So towards the end, what they showed was that he was taking out this nice, sleek Macintosh from a regular mail envelope, right? He would have presented that in a very nicer way in his own Apple box, which we see in all the store nowadays. But he did not do that. He took a regular envelope. And imagine what would have audience have it in mind, that it is a product probably which every can afford it and use it. So yes, do put a show on in the end and try to take help from a Steve Jobs presentation. Presentation, right? This is what we are being learning. Presentation means exchanging of information. It just doesn't mean that we have to prepare our presentation and the presenter has to present to the audience. As I mentioned, it means the exchange of information. So there's always a session of questions which are being asked, and a lot of presenters dread that. Dread because they feel of losing control over their presentation. So no matter you have prepared your presentation well and good in regard to all the skills that we have learned, there's another thing that we have to keep in mind is to deal with the questions calmly, because this is something that we cannot run away from it. We have to exchange the very important part, which is the exchange of information from the audience. So make it sure when you start your presentation or when you're introducing, you tell the audience when are you going to answer their questions. A lot of presenters try to say they will answer their questions as it comes, and a lot of them tell that all your queries will be answered towards the end of the presentation. I have to tell you one thing. What personally I feel from my experience, if I tell the audience that I'll answer your questions as it comes, it really distracts me completely, and sometimes I try to go off topic because questions and answers can go endlessly and I can be off the track. And the other important thing, I can lose on time. To keep a track on time would be very difficult. So my personal advice would be to ask for the question session towards the end of the presentation. So Have in mind, when you're asked for a question, make it sure you answer it directly and honestly. Always have in mind to answer to the point. It is very important for you to answer a question to the point. Always have in mind, you are not a person who would have information of all the world. So you're going to come across a question which you may not be able to answer it. How do we deal with it? The best way to deal with it is to accept it. So just in case you come across a question that you do not know the answer for, tell them that I am sorry, I'm not aware of it, but I'll definitely try to find it out for you. After mentioning this, make it sure you do mention to that person to take his contact number and see you after the presentation. That definitely gives a little personal touch. Another way to deal when you are not sure about what to answer, just in case you know there are a lot of expertise in the audience who can answer your question, you can always say, I think Mr. X can help you answer this question and help me escape from my ignorance. So this is a very polite way, and then this way the question can be answered with one of the expertise in the audience. Okay, I have to ask you one thing. If in a room I just tell 4 of you to come and give your introduction, how many of you would get nervous? I'm sure 3 out of 4 would get nervous, right? So getting nervous at any point, and especially during the presentation, is normal. So no matter how well you're prepared again, and how many skills and techniques you have learned, there's always a little nervousness, probably, which you have to face when you're ready for your presentation. Though it's not a part that you have to do during your presentation, but it's always better to have few tips so that you can cope up with your nerves very well. So, being nervousness is not a problem. It's the kind of energy that your body produces when you come under certain circumstances. So how to use that energy wisely rather than making it poor and probably discouraging you not to present. So, let's see how we can do that. First of all, there are different symptoms of being nervous. The common symptoms that we all face is probably the butterflies in our stomach, right? Sweaty hands, which is fine. Probably short of breath, maybe feeling more thirsty. So symptoms really depends upon person to person, but these are common things that each and every person would probably face. So here, we're going to just learn simple strategies how to cope up with our nervousness. First of all, deep breathing. You know, when we are nervous, our body produces a chemical called adrenaline, which probably gives you a lack of oxygen in your brain and you feel short of breath. So here comes the deep breathing, which would probably give you a perfect amount of oxygen for your brain and you can think calmly. Besides deep breathing, drinking of water helps a lot too. For the same reason, for the same chemical, it probably produces something which gives you a dry throat. So drinking water before the presentation and even during the presentation by taking small intervals, taking a sip or two would always help you to overcome the anxiety and the nerves. Chewing a gum, right? Do not laugh at me. You know, the researchers have shown and the studies have shown that chewing gum can really reduce your anxiety and the stress level and can improve your alertness. So make it sure you can, if you like it, you can chewing a gum, but do not forget to take it out before you start your presentation, right? It sounds funny, but you can try it. Smile. Smile is a very common and an easy way to release the stress. It gives the positiveness from you, and you in turn get the positive response from the audience. And there where you just calm down yourself because you're getting a great response. Another thing that we can keep in mind to reduce our anxiety is pause. When to pause. So some people, before you start your presentation, you can pause on the stage, look at your audience, have an eye contact, and smile. It helps you to gain confidence because you're getting in touch with the audience before you start the presentation. In case you want to pause in between, you can even do that for a few seconds, and that helps you in the same way. Another thing to have in mind is to move slow. To move slow means you can move around the area where you're presenting yourself. Just do not try to move too much forward or backward because that can disrupt your voice in which you're talking to your audience, right? So move slow. Another thing is relaxation exercise. I have to admit that before coming here so that I can present to you, I listened to the music that I liked. Some people try to take a little walk, or some people try to do some workout which would probably relax them. So again, it depends on an individual what relaxing exercise he or she wants to do before presenting. So do have in your mind that you can cope up with all the nerves that you can have faced during your presentation. Do not ever be scared. Fight the fear. Now that during our session, we have learned skills and techniques for how to give an effective presentation. We have learned how to prepare our presentation, methods to organize our material for presentation. We have learned how to cope up with nervousness during the presentation and how to deal with questions that come across during our presentation. I am sure that you all are very prepared, relaxed, and confident about your next presentation. Presentation skills are very important for an individual success, for a business success, for a public image, for leadership. So we can see how important it is to give an effective presentation. It is very well said that you may have great ideas, but if you can't cross that ideas to your audience in a right way, those ideas are not going to get you anywhere. According to my suggestion, I would always advise each and every one of you to have your own speaking style. If you really want to fast track your career, make it sure you volunteer and deliver as many presentations as you can. Thank you.
मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल मस्ट हैव एडवाइज्ड यू कि आपको इंग्लिश इंप्रूव करना है तो पहले आपको ग्रामर सीखना पड़ेगा, नाउन, वर्ब, एडजेक्टिव, ये सारा सीखना पड़ेगा. बट आई नो यू नो इट्स टू कॉम्प्लिकेटेड. अगर हम उस प्रोसेस में जाते हैं तो हमको ईयर्स लग जाता है एंड हम लोग उसी जगह पे रहते हैं. वी आर नॉट एबल टू इम्प्रूव अवर इंग्लिश. सो आपको ग्रामर पे ध्यान देना है. इट इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट बट इट्स नॉट दैट इम्पॉर्टेंट कि वो आपको इंग्लिश बोलने से रोके. यू स्टार्ट प्रैक्टिसिंग. एंड अगर आपको और भी कोर्सेज सीखने हैं, यू कैन लॉग ऑन टू अवर वेबसाइट www.millionlights.org and enroll for a lot of courses available there. You can connect with us on social media as well. We are available on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. You can connect with us over there. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any queries related to any of the courses, you can call us on support number and you can send us email as well. So keep watching Million Lights. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.